Why is it so easy to ignore the biggest and most painful problems in our lives? Exactly a year ago, I did this journaling exercise that made it stupidly obvious what I needed to work on, but I still chose to ignore it. It was literally easier to quit my freaking job as a doctor of physical therapy than it was to just do what this exercise was suggesting that I do. In this video, I'm going to share, of course, what the exercise is and how to do it, why I fell for this goal-setting paradox, and how I use this to overcome my biggest insecurity. So you might be wondering, what the heck was Simi avoiding, and what's her so-called biggest insecurity? Well, as I show you how to do this exercise, it's going to be pretty freaking apparent, so I'll just let you figure that out. First, draw a circle in your journal or on a piece of paper, and then divide that circle into 8 equalish parts. From here, label each line as such: health, friends and family, significant other or romance, personal growth, fun and recreation, job or career, physical environment or home space, and finally, money and finances. Then, on a scale of 0 to 10, rate yourself in each of these areas, 10 being you're the happiest you think you could possibly be here, and 0 being so screwed that you think things couldn't possibly be worse. Try not to overthink this and just go with your gut. After that, guesstimate where a dot would fall on the line for each rating of the categories and then connect them. And if you can't be bothered with a pen and paper, or doing this exercise might take you hours because you suffer from perfectionism, for the sake of this exercise, I have enabled you by linking a download where you can quickly plug and play your numbers to see how this turns out. I think it's pretty rare that we think about all of these areas in our life in relation to each other, and most of the time, we don't even think about some of these areas regularly, at all. I think doing this simple inventory on our lives can help us focus on the things that truly set us free from the BS in life to allow more time and energy in other areas that we want to spend our time in. Straight away, this little circle is already onto something, but let's get our wheels turning even more by asking these questions. How bumpy would this be if this were a real wheel? Which areas would you begin addressing first? What would a 10 look like in those areas? And as for the last question, this was one that I added on much later, and that's because it came after I had a really painful realization. And whether you doodle this little circle wheel thingy or not, this realization is probably something that everyone does that actually cripples our mindset and deepens our insecurities. Like when it came to the second question, the areas that I wanted to start addressing first were money and finances, fun and recreation, and health. I can tell you now that for the remainder of the year, I killed it in the fun and health department. I saw Beyonce in concert, hiked in the mountains, and even started working with a personal trainer. And as for money and finances, well, so I ended up doing this exercise again about a year later without referring to my previous wheel, and also without that final question because I still hadn't had my crazy realization yet. This time I made the decision to start focusing on addressing money and finances along with my job and career. I really needed to get serious about these areas because since I had already made the decision to quit my job, I kinda needed to prepare for no longer having a stable income. So I wrote some goals out and I set out to start working on them. But somewhere along the way, during the making of this video, I thought it'd be interesting to compare my two little wheels. It came out that I actually rated myself higher in 5 out of the 8 areas in life, which I felt pretty freaking good about. My wheel was looking rounder, and I felt like I had made decent progress in each area. But when it came to money and finances, one of the 3 areas that I was supposed to be addressing per last year's wheel, I rated myself even lower. Then when it came to answering how bumpy would this be if this were a real wheel, I wrote, like a grocery cart on a smooth floor, but now it's super loud and hard to ignore. But why was it that I avoided working on this area of my life when it was so freaking obvious that that's where I should have been putting my focus? At this point, I realized that by focusing on the other more appealing areas in my life, I had made my insecurities around money and finance a lot bigger. It was like a giant elephant in the room. And suddenly, it kind of just felt like all my other wins in the other areas wouldn't mean shit if I couldn't address this. And I'd never be happy, I'd always be stressed about money no matter how much I made. I'd end up regretting leaving my job and looking stupid for doing it and feeling all that shame. And of course, this was bound to put a ton of stress on my marriage. So where did I go wrong? Why? Oh my god. I've got it. I've got the answer. As a fellow human being, we tend to lean towards taking the path of least resistance. So for example, I set a goal to do 10 push-ups off of my knees when I had never been able to do one. And this was easier than taking a few minutes out of the week to get my financial shit together. Hell, I was even willing to quit my job before facing the insecurities that came up when calling my student loan provider. In the beginning of balancing out my little wheel thingy, it was pretty easy to ignore my biggest problem areas because it felt good and productive to work on any other area that also needed improvement, and my excitement about making progress in this area further validated avoiding my financial crisis. Ironically, my goals are what made it really easy to ignore my deepest insecurities around money. And this is the goal-setting paradox. When making progress on our goals blinds us from what we should truly be working on, like task avoidance, but more existential. Now, this doesn't mean that I think that goals are bad and I'm gonna abandon all of mine and everything I did was a waste of time. It just really opened my eyes to the fact that I didn't want to address what was going on in here, and my goals made it impossible for me to focus on what this simple little wheel was screaming at me to do. So, what did I do to overcome my biggest insecurity around money and finances? Well, it all comes back to this simple question that I've added to the wheel. But first, I need to make it really clear that I am a very goal-oriented person, and I strongly believe that in order to be disciplined enough to follow through on any of them, you need to know your values. But there's also something else that you need to know, and once I figured this out, I started to actually work on my insecurities around money. I started reading finance books, I made a financial plan with Abby, I stopped browsing on Amazon, and I bought a finance journal, and I even made the dreaded phone call to my student loan provider.
Thank you for calling your student loan provider. It's about damn time. Press 1 if you would like to complete a survey for this call, or hang up and move on with your life.
So the other day, I got hit with a $600 towing fee. Not exactly ideal when you don't have a job, but basically I didn't see the signs to move our cars, and me along with 25 other people got towed. Now, in the past, I would have lost my shit over this and wasted tons of time and energy raging about it. But because I had already started working on addressing my insecurities around money, I was quickly able to bounce back and focus on my goals without all the drama. In fact, this just further motivated me to heighten my focus on this area. My life coach was actually the person who got me to do this wheel exercise, and she brought something really important to my attention. All this time, I had been repeatedly saying the phrase, "I need to deal with my finances," and at some point, she suggested using the word control. Then, the second time I answered the question, what would a 10 look like in these areas? I wrote, I'm in control of my finances. Reading that simple change in phrasing made something click so hard, and this can be applied in really any category of our lives. I mean, my best-selling sticker has this freaking reminder on it, but for some reason, I was just stuck in this negative mindset. The deeper reason why it was so easy for me to ignore my problems became crystal clear, and I had known the answer all along. So if I were to go back and do this exercise for the first time all over again, I'd ask myself this one last question. What are the limiting beliefs you have in your lowest areas? So now, when I go to revisit my goals every quarter of the year, this question forces me to acknowledge my limiting beliefs that could completely wreck my progress, because they're bound to show up in like different areas of life as we grow. There's a saying that goes like, the magic you're looking for is waiting for you in the work you are currently avoiding. If this could not be further from the truth. But keep in mind, this question loses its power if it's answered without doing an honest inventory of our lives. We might fool ourselves into believing we're making meaningful progress by working on the areas that we think we need to work on, or even worse, we just focus on the things that we're already good at the expense of letting our insecurities suck the fun out of it. It is totally possible to make goals that both work on our insecurities and make progress in the direction we want to go. But that only comes if you know how to set them the right way. So, if you realize that you too might have been fooling yourself with your goals and instead want to overcome your insecurities by redoing them, watch this. TTYL.
Like a grocery cart on a smooth floor, but now it's super loud and hard to ignore.
Wow, I am crazy.